Sorry, I was on mute, and I'm already anticipating a couple of technical challenges because it seems that the connectivity is not great today. You might have noticed if you check the Irish news, there was a huge storm here, but this is not the topic today. So today is the 37th episode, as I was saying on mute, and I have an Irish guest who is not based in Ireland. She is based in Italy. She is in Pisa. So she is in Tuscany, in the beautiful region of Tuscany, right in the middle of Italy. She has been living there for a couple of decades, so it's since '86. So you do the maths. A lot have changed, as I was just discussing with her before we went live. She changed, the Italy changed, Ireland changed. So there's a lot to talk about it, and she is great with words. She's absolutely talented with words, and no wonder, because she's an author, she's a translator, and she's an English teacher. So I'm sure the discussion is going to be great, and I welcome you to join us. If you have queries along the discussion, feel free to put on the chat. At some point, we're going to grab them and answer. So stay with us if it's something you are into. On the other hand, I would be very thankful if you would give us a thumbs up if you appreciate the conversation, and share with others. Share on social media. There are so many platforms where people can access these conversations. So go on WhatsApp, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and please share. It's a massive support because I do this on my own, with my own means, and it's not a lot of resources, believe me or not. So please do that. And if you haven't subscribed, like all YouTubers, I'm going to ask you to subscribe, and or ask your friends or family to subscribe. And I'm going to welcome Elizabeth MacDonald. I haven't mentioned her name, but that's her name, Elizabeth MacDonald. I'm going to bring her to the studio. Hi, Elizabeth.
Hi, Vitor. It's great to be here. Thanks for the invite.
Great. Yes, it's a mutual pleasure. So I've been looking forward for this for quite some time. I had your name actually in my list, but what of things happened, and I was very keen because I like your trajectory and the fact that you are all about words, and words are essential on our daily life, and on a podcast. Well, they are the engine of conversation. So I'm sure you are someone great to talk to. So before we went live, we were talking about the cultural difference between Ireland and Italy. I know there's a lot to talk about it, but if you would say right now, what are the cultural differences versus '86 when you moved there? What would be the differences, and what would be the things in common?
Okay, well, here's the thing. When I moved in 1986, I went to Bari, down in the deep south. It was very different, very, very different. I came from Dublin. Both countries are Catholic, but I found it was a different type of Catholicism down in Bari. I found it quite difficult to deal with on a day-to-day basis. So to be quite honest, after 2 years, I applied to the University of Pisa and I got a job there. So I moved to Pisa. It had always been my dream to move to Tuscany. It's such a beautiful part of Italy and the world, to be quite honest. And I've been in Pisa ever since 1988.
Going back to Bari, so what were the main challenges? I'm curious to understand what was your struggle. If you want to mention a couple of things, I don't want to go in detail, but
Okay.
I'm very interested to know what is it.
Okay, well, I suppose moving from Catholic Ireland as it was at that stage in the 1980s, there was no abortion, contraception came in 1985. There was no divorce. It was a very conservative country. I moved to Italy, which in theory was more progressive. But to be quite honest, I found, and I'm talking about my experience in Bari, it was extremely hypocritical. It was difficult to deal with the hypocrisy. I moved into a house with a girl and her family because I was trying to coach her for her English. And I went out on my first Saturday evening in Bari to meet other colleagues I was going to be working with. And I had a very tame evening, came home at midnight to find the girl's uncle waiting for me. He read me the riot act. He said, "Voi nordiche, you northern women, you can't come back at midnight. No, no, no." So I was shocked to my rooty tooths at that. I just thought, it's unbelievable. The man doesn't know me. He knows nothing about me. He's making judgments. He's no right to do that. I found, so there was a curfew at 10. If you wanted to be una ragazza per bene, and that's very important in Italy, to be per bene, proper. If you want to be una ragazza per bene, I had to come home at the curfew at 10. But what went on before 10 just curled my hair. So I found it was very hypocritical. I had to get out of it. I came to Pisa and it was different. Now, it has to be said that Bari, in the meantime, has changed immensely. It's very progressive, very forward-looking. None of that hypocrisy pertains anymore. It's not a thing. And a friend that I made down in Bari, Kelly Giannacco, we're still friends. She's a very close friend, even still. She guided me through thick and thin down there when I was having difficulty making sense of cultural situations. She guided me through. Here's the thing, though. I think as a Catholic, I had some insight into possible hypocrisy. I saw my English friends. They were lost. They didn't know what to do. They couldn't deal with just the hypocrisy. As English people, so many of them just lost their way up and went home. I just went to a different part of Italy and it was fine.
So is it fair to say that you found home in Pisa?
Yes. I have two homes now. I'm Dublin. I was born in Dublin. Dublin is my home. Dublin's in my heart. But I have a second home in Pisa. I feel that that's immensely enriching. I've been accepted here. There've been highs and lows, of course, but it's been steep learning curve at times, but it's definitely been worth it. I love Pisa.
And what was it that you found in Pisa that made it the second home?
Well, starting off, it was actually concrete details, trivial they may be, but for example, I just remember down in Bari there were no trees. The weather was great, but no trees. I missed trees. I missed green spaces. I found that in Pisa. There's a beautiful place. I remember the first time I saw it, Viale delle Piagge. It's just one of my happy places in Pisa. It's a 2-kilometer long avenue, tree-lined avenue that skirts the river Arno. What's not to like? It's a wonderful place. I love it. So it was things like that. But it was also that I just found that people minded their own business a little bit more.
Yeah. So is it something that you think Irish people can relate to, that they are about their own stuff, their own garden, they are more transparent, more straightforward?
Well, I would say actually it might just be that English people are more transparent, more straightforward. They fell a cropper in the south of Italy. I could read the situation better. Maybe that's just me as a person. I don't know. I could read the situations better. I found they were less complicated in Pisa. Less hypocrisy.
Yeah, that matters a lot, because
It
there's
does.
one thing you don't want to find, especially when you are abroad and starting a new chapter of your life, is problems. Like you go to another place just to have some fun and try to learn something. And if life is full of issues, you better stay at home. Of course, you can never be in a situation that everything is fine and peaceful and a bed of roses. But if it turns out that there are problems erupting everywhere, then what's the point?
Absolutely. Well, the thing of it is, I stayed in Pisa. So obviously, what I found attractive about the country, at a certain point, it outweighed what was troublesome about it. And I just got on with it. What doesn't break you makes you stronger, right?
True. In terms of language, were you able to speak Italian, or you
Here's the
learned
thing.
in Italy?
I actually studied Italian at
In
university.
Dublin?
In Dublin at university. Now, it is true that it's one thing studying a language, it's another thing going to the actual country and speaking it.
Yeah.
But I do feel that it gave me an advantage. Coming to Italy, I knew what Italian was like, because language it's not just words, it's also codes and ways of being. So I knew, for example, how important it was to give the lay form. Just codes like that. I studied it, and so I was prepared to a certain extent. And it was just a question of perfecting my Italian when I came to Italy.
You touch base on something that I find personally very, very interesting. That language is not only words; it's also codes, and I would also add behaviors,
Yes.
ethos to that. So, let's say when you speak Italian, you think there is one Elizabeth, and then when you speak English, there is another Elizabeth, or what is the common thing between the two?
That's a
What
very
remains?
fascinating question, actually. I guess I do have one persona in Italian and another persona in English. Here's the thing. I think that Italian on a micro level, and by micro level, I mean word endings. So it's Italian isn't gendered, English isn't. So you have masculine and feminine, and adjectives that go with it. It all has to agree. Singular and plural, that has to agree too. So at a micro level, it's hyper organized. Whereas English isn't. English at a micro level it's a bit chaotic, to be quite honest. But at a macro level, and by macro I mean tenses, not just endings, but actual tenses. There are more tenses in English than there are in Italian, especially to do with the future. I feel that has impacted the culture as well, because at a micro level, take the metric system. At a micro level, it's hyper organized. It's extremely logical and wonderfully organized. In English, you have imperial, the imperial measurement. It's based on a king's foot, the size of his foot, big man, big foot. It's extremely chaotic. So English at a micro level is chaotic, but at a macro level, say, the political system, the way the country is actually run, it works. It's not chaotic. Whereas at a macro level, Italy it's quite chaotic.
Yeah.
Let's just say differences between English and Italian. Well, as I said, English is not gendered. Italian is gendered. There's also Irish to throw in the mix as well. Now, I don't actually speak Irish, but I did learn it. It's a regret of mine that I didn't learn it better, but that'll be for some time in the future, maybe. In Irish, for example, there's no word for yes, there's no word for no. You use the verb again. So I did, it was, you can't. You use the verb again. There's no yes and no, it's too black and white. There's no verb for have in Irish. No. So, for example, it's a little different, but say, for example, in English you say, I am happy. In Irish you'd say, tá as happiness is on me. So you have nothing in Irish. I think that it explains a lot about the Irish mentality and why we were heading down a cul-de-sac with the English, who are so fixated on having.
Yeah.
It was a definite standoff there. There's also word order, which in Irish is Semitic. That's different to any other Indo-European language I know.
Yeah.
So that's playing into my awareness of English as well. However, there are immense advantages to having having English as a native language. The only disadvantage that I can actually think about is, for example, it does tend to make you lazy in acquiring a second language.
Yeah.
People in Ireland, people in England, Australia, Canada, America, they usually don't have a second language. Whereas you go to Sweden, everyone speaks English. You go to Holland, everyone speaks English. So that is a disadvantage. But at the same time, it's amazing being able to go anywhere in the world, open your mouth in English, and people, generally speaking, they can follow, they can understand. It's an amazing, it's the lingua franca of our time.
Yeah, it's a tool at the end of the day, especially when you are traveling. Like you may be able to find that cafe, you may be able to find the tram line just because you speak English.
Yeah.
That's the only reason, not because you are outgoing, not because you are good with Google Maps, just because you have the right command of that language. And that's a fantastic tool because it can change your whole experience, let's say, of the time you're spending in Bolivia, for instance.
It's true. Absolutely. Yep.
So one thing you also mentioned that I liked it. So in Irish, they would say, happiness is on me. I didn't know that's something I just learned today. So it's similar to the way that Plato would say that people fall in love. Love is like a possession. So it's like a virus, let's say. It comes from outside and takes you over.
That's
so you are
true.
In love is love that is taking you over.
That's true.
So we found some common paths between Ireland and Plato here.
Excellent.
That's something new. Yeah.
Excellent.
Something new. Yeah. So, but I want to get to you. So, who is the Elizabeth speaking? How would you describe Elizabeth speaking Italian and Elizabeth speaking English? Would they get along?
I think they would. To be quite honest, at this stage, I actually even dream in Italian.
I wanted to ask you that question. Actually.
Yeah, I've interiorized the language so much that I actually dream in Italian.
Even if you are in Ireland, because most expats dream in the language of the place where they are when they are there. But if they are back home, let's say when you are in Dublin, then you go back to English. So you still dream in Italian when you are in Dublin?
That's a good question. I haven't actually thought about that. No dreams come to mind that I had in Italian in Ireland, in Dublin. That's an interesting question. There is a sort of regression. However, having lived abroad for so long, when I go to Dublin, it's a bittersweet experience now because I can't help but see it with outside eyes. And I've lived as an outsider in Italy for decades, but I'm not 100% at home either in Dublin at this stage, because I can't help but see the place with outside eyes. So it's a little bit bittersweet.
Yeah, that's the price. When you are living abroad and you get the benefits, like everything comes with a price. And I feel the same when I go back to Portugal. It takes me 2-3 days to be to act normal. And now I have a separate podcast where I speak Portuguese regularly. But before I would look retarded, like to say the least. Until I was able to interact with others and all that. In terms of writing, you still write in English. You have a novel, a historical novel, which I think with references to the Italian history. Do you think you wrote that piece because you are in Italy, or is something that could have happened even if you would be living elsewhere?
Well, to be quite honest, the seeds of that historical novel go back a long time. I was actually at university when the figure of Frederick II, he was in the early 13th century, Frederick II brought himself to my attention. So he'd been floating around in my head for quite a while. But it wasn't until, I think it was in about, say, 2000, that the character that I knew was going to actually make a novel of it came to my attention, and that is the figure of Michael Scott. He was a Scottish monk by name and by nature, Michael Scott, Scottish monk who, through his own intelligence, made his way up and became physician to Frederick II. He then also became his astrologer or necromancer, as some people called him. He actually figures in Dante's Inferno. Dante's placed him right down the bottom of hell as a necromancer and a soothsayer. But I did a little bit of research into him. Both men were extremely complex figures. They were ahead of their time, both of them. So from that point of view, from the point of view of character, it was Frederick II. He lodged in my mind when I was at university. Michael Scott was more recent, but I could also say the time itself, the early 13th century, it was a turning point. It was a turning point above all in terms of how universities were regulated. In the sense that, I suppose it's the Middle Ages, so what you get on the one hand is good universities, but on the other hand you have the Inquisition. That started in the early 13th century as well. And the man behind that was Gregory IX. He was a force of nature, and he took it into his head that he didn't like. He abhorred Frederick II. So, however, to get back to the universities, so while on the one hand he was starting up the Inquisition, on the other hand he was also regulating universities. What he did was he managed to sidestep the bishops. That's something I think was pretty amazing. So, for example, say up until the early 13th century, the theology faculty was the most powerful and the most prestigious faculty in the university. That changed thanks to Gregory IX, because he managed to give the power to the chancellors, lay people. So what he effectively did was he separated church and knowledge, while, however, maintaining absolute control over the yea or nay about what could or could not be studied. But he set the groundwork for our modern conception of universities. I think that's pretty amazing. That was a turning point. There's also the idea in the novel of convivencia in Spain, where in Toledo you had Christians, Jews and Arabs. They managed to work together and collaborate. It was an amazing feat for the time. To a lesser extent, it was true in Palermo, where Frederick II was based. So those two ideas of universities, the dissemination of knowledge, who has power over knowledge? Do you relinquish your power over knowledge? That started in the early 13th century. And also the idea of the convivencia, which I think it's something I think we can learn from even now.
Yeah, absolutely. In terms of writing routine, I presume you had to do a lot of research. It's not just inspiration based. Now there's this time that you have to go through books and collecting information, putting all together. So it's not just sit and write. You need first to be aware of the context, try to understand the characters, what was their impact in history, their background and all that. But I would be more interested on the writing aspect. So what is your writing routine like after the research being conducted?
Okay, well, generally speaking, I would do, well, for a historical novel, it takes research, a lot of research. So I did my spade work, did the research, and then I let it sediment. I put it aside, because it needs to be character driven. If it's going to be a good novel, it needs to be character driven. So I put the research aside, and I then focus on the characters. the interplay between characters, psychological dynamics, undercurrents, that kind of stuff. It's very, very important. And at that point, having put the research aside, only what's really important, because the thing of it is, I'm not an academic. My memory is not that good. So I put the research aside, and only what's really pertinent to develop the characters appears in the actual scenes then that I would start to write. So I write a scene, then let it go and come back to it then the day after. And at that point, I see, does it work? Does it not work? What needs to be edited? There's always something to be edited. So the main focus for me is the characters. It's character driven. And you can build your facts, weave your facts into interaction between characters. But it has to start with the characters.
I think that's the trick is now when you're writing a novel, it's to put words in the mouth of the characters and how they interact, how they react to the other character words, the pace of the conversation, because sometimes it seems that it's not spontaneous, it's forced, but at the same time it's a book, so you have to be very mindful that you are writing a book that needs to look like an actual conversation, but it fits the pages of a book. So there is some middle territory that you want to make sure you can get in.
Yeah, absolutely, I agree.
Let's jump now to translation.
Okay.
Which I think is a very, very important piece. So I heard from some translators a very controversial sentence that I wanna throw here. They say, when I'm translating, I think I'm creating a new book. I think it's a huge statement. Okay, I partially agree with that. I understand the point, but let's say if I'm the author of that book, I don't know how happy I was going to be with that. So
I agree.
I get the merits, but I also feel that there is some, I wouldn't say arrogance, but there is some ownership that I think is a bit too much from the translator. How would you perceive this statement?
I think it is a little bit OTT. I actually had a translation teacher. I don't know if you know the Anglo-Hungarian poet George Certes. He's an amazing poet. I actually attended a course of his in Trinity, and he said translation is like dancing. You need a leader and you need the person who's going to be led. That's the translator. The writer is the leader, the person who leads. The translator has to have the empathy and the intuition to be able to follow the lead of the writer. So I think that it should be just a ghostly presence. A translator should be a ghostly presence. You need to do duty. You need to pay your dues to the writer. That's the thing about it. Sometimes you see, if you get a translator who's a writer in their own, his or her own right, sometimes the urge to put a stylistic stamp on a translation, it's too strong. So that's why I would say, as a translator, I would always try to take a back seat and let the actual style of the original come through. I'd like to just actually, if I may, give a shout out to Daniele Camilli here, because I've just finished a translation book, and Daniele Camilli was the means by which I got that commission. It was a fascinating project. It's about it's a novel faction, basically, anti-litteram, before its time, faction by an Italian writer called Silvio Micheli. He wrote in a novel format, he wrote the story of a ship and the divers aboard this ship. It was also a tragedy. The divers, they were from Viareggio in Tuscany, and they were hired to locate a ship and then salvage the treasure aboard this ship. It was at a depth of 130 meters. And this was all taking place in between 1928 and 1932, when diving was in its infancy, as it were. But the head diver on the ship was a man of genius. He stopped going to school in second class, and he was sent out to sea. But that didn't stop him. He still used his incredible brain to create a number of devices that are still being used by divers now. Now, here's the thing. That translation work was a very steep learning curve. And not for the usual reasons, because there are two aspects to translation. One is the actual words, the building blocks, and the other aspect is the whole building. That is the meaning, the unsaid, reading between the lines. What's the meta meaning in something? So this translation project for me was a little bit different because paradoxically, it wasn't the actual cultural implications or the meta message about anything. That was fine. It was actually the building blocks, the words themselves. There was a lot of nautological terminology. So I had a very steep learning curve. I was immersed in nautical terminology for the last 2 years, 2.5 years. I got to the end of it. It's being printed at the moment, and it's going to be launched on the 7th of December. So that's something I'm definitely looking forward to. It was a fascinating project. I'm delighted to have I'm delighted to have been given this opportunity.
We will put the links on the description that people can start to see where is it or where they can find it. Let's stay on the translation because I have a lot to go through on this. So when that there's Portuguese from Portugal, Portuguese from Brazil. There's a massive difference. It's a massive difference. It's more or less like English in Ireland and the UK and English in the States. That's the analogy I usually use to tell people. So if I'm translating a piece from English to Portuguese, I need to be very aware of the market. So I always speak to the person and say, what's your objective? Do you want to make sure that this will reach the Portuguese audience or the Brazilian? I don't want to find a middle ground because it makes a big difference. People have different aspirations, but it's most of the times up to the publisher. But sometimes the person is just interested in having it translated, and then they will knock the doors of the publisher. So in your case, how do you approach the English-speaking public? Would you think of the Irish? Would you think of the American? I know the differences are not huge, but there is some cultural difference.
There are some cultural differences. There are also some grammatical spelling differences as well. To be quite honest, I would stick with what I'm familiar with. That is the British-Irish market. And here's the thing, Vitor, Irish people are great readers. So I think that for a small country, we punch above our weight in terms of readership, because Irish people do enjoy a good book. So I would look more to the British-Irish market. I think at a certain point then, if something I've written or something I've translated were to be sold in the United States, another edition would have to be brought out with all the spelling differences, because there are quite a few.
So you think Irish people are very good readers? It's something I would fully acknowledge. This is my experience when I go around. Maybe previous generations were more into books than now. But I think the benchmark here is Ireland in the 2024 versus other countries. So is it something that you observe when you return to Ireland?
People read a lot.
Yes, it's something that you still observe when you visit Ireland. And
oh yes, well, there are book clubs all over the place. People just love to get stuck into a good book and then discuss it. So Yes. Then there are very good sections in the newspapers and online of book reviews. It's a big deal.
Yeah,
Book reviews are a big
absolutely.
deal.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think Dublin has a book smell. That's my perception. Since I visit for the first time in 2006, there was some book smell. I don't know exactly how to
Amazing.
describe it, but I feel it. I mean, there are certain parts where it smells more than others, but for sure,
Mhm.
in certain parts, I'm thinking about like of Rathmines, Ranelagh, that
That's
I'm very familiar
amazing.
with, even Portobello. Maybe not as much as before, but it's still there. It's still there in comparison to other major cities. I think it's still there. So when you visit Dublin, you said that sometimes you don't feel totally at home. It takes some time. What are the things that you miss, and what are the things that you don't miss from
That's an
Ireland?
interesting question. Okay, let's say the things that I miss are a certain element of courtesy on the road.
I like that. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. I
because
totally relate
driving
to
in
that.
Italy, it's a little bit stressful driving in Italy. Now, here's the thing: I actually got my driver's license late because I just found the idea of driving on an Italian road terrifying for so long. And now I got my driver's, I've had it now for, well, since 2010. So I took my time. Here's the thing. My father actually used to race motorcycles for Ireland. We all
Mhm.
rebel in our own way. I got my driver's license when I was in my 40s. Um,
I
the
don't have
thing of it
mine,
is,
and I'm
sorry?
41, so I don't have a driver's license. I'm 41, so
Oh,
just
that's
for
okay.
you not to feel that
There's time.
guilty. So
There's time. If
yeah,
you want to get around to it, there's time. I did it because I realized at a certain point my son just needed to get places, and I
mm,
couldn't be bringing him around on a bicycle. So I had to get a driver's license. Um, but the thing of it is, I find that Italian drivers, now I hope my Italian listeners are not going to get offended, but Italian drivers, they're quite aggressive.
yeah.
I remember driving around Dublin with my sister in the car beside me, and we came to a roundabout. And of course, the cars are coming from the opposite side to the side they come in Italy. But I was, I wasn't actually revving the engine, but I was mooching forward into the roundabout. And my sister just turned to me and she said, "Would you stop being so aggressive?" And I understood. You see, the thing of it is, in Italy, if you don't show the car behind you that I'm trying to move into the roundabout, they beep.
Yeah.
They just won't wait until, all the cars have gone by and I can go in and no problem. They beep at you. So I was busy trying to send the message to the cars behind me who weren't at all concerned that I'm trying, don't beep, I'm trying. So that's one thing. My sister said to me, "Stop being so aggressive." There's also a thing that up until very recently, I do feel that crossing a road in Italy, the one place you shouldn't cross the road is on the pedestrian crossing. Because by making a car stop at a pedestrian crossing, you're obliging an Italian to follow a rule. They don't like that. So I used to advise my family members when they come over, the one place you shouldn't cross the road is at a pedestrian crossing. And if you do cross the road at a pedestrian crossing, or maintain eye contact with the driver at all times. However, it has to be said that crossing the road anywhere else, they will screech to halt and go, "Prego, over you go," because you're not obliging them to follow a rule. That has changed. I have to say that in recent years, all I have to do now is approach a pedestrian crossing and the cars stop. That used to happen at all. Didn't used to happen at all. It was tended to be kind of, you stepped out onto the pedestrian crossing at your own risk and peril, and the cars did a slalom around you, trying to avoid you. So it was quite risky. That's changed. I have to say that has changed. However, here's the thing. If, for example, I'm driving along a road and I have to stop because of a car in front of me, an Italian car will just drive straight past, no acknowledgement. I do miss a little bit of courtesy. Whereas in Ireland, if you're driving along the road and you stop to let someone pass by, they'll just, sorry, there's my hand.
Yeah.
They'll just acknowledge, just go, that's all you have to do, acknowledge it. Or on a road, there aren't that many motorways in Ireland, as I'm sure you've found out. But if on a 2-lane road, if, for example, there's a tractor, as can happen, a tractor in front of you slowing everything down, the tractor will pull over to let the other cars pass you by. And you just press your hazard lights just to go, thanks, I saw that. Thanks. Just a little act of courtesy. I do miss those little acts of courtesy on the roads in Italy. It's the only crib that I have about Italy. The only thing that I'm not thrilled about. For the rest of it, I think it's wonderful. I love Italy.
Yeah. I was just thinking, it's the exact same in Portugal, the way that people act on the road. As a matter of fact, the moment I arrived in Lisbon and I got on my father's car, I can count maybe 2, 3, 5 minutes until I hear the first beep, beep, and my father cursing. It's it's going to happen. It's going to happen. It's guaranteed. It's like, let's say 5 minutes if I'm lucky. It always happens, and I can say, okay, welcome to Portugal. You are home. My pleasure. You took the right flight. It's the same. Yeah. And that reminds me of another thing. I remember when I was working in East Point here in Grand Tarf, back in the days, like 15 years ago, there was this Greek guy who said, driving gets worse when you are in the south and as you go east. And what I mean by that is driving is very bad in Portugal. Okay, let's just look at the map. It gets worse in Spain. It gets even worse in Italy. It gets terrible in Greece. It's absolute mud in Egypt. It's an absolute shit show if you are in the Gulf. And there are no words when you get into India. Diagonal. And he's exactly right. I might have pissed off a lot of people there that from these countries, but they know it's true, and I just curse on my own. So I hope people will forgive me.
Absolutely, absolutely. However, things do evolve, because I remember something my father used to say when we were children, red lights in Ireland. And he used to say, a red light in Ireland means just 2 more can get through. Just 2 more can get through. So it's relative. Now, Irish drivers have changed. They've evolved. Well, the same has happened in Italy. And I have to say, we went to Greece this summer, and it wasn't the same as in the 80s. Greek drivers have evolved a little bit as well. So bit by bit, things are getting a little bit better.
Mm-hmm. Going back to Ireland, but what's the thing that you miss from Ireland? Is this the courtesy on the road? Is there anything outside the road that you want to name, or that's the only one?
Well, to be quite honest, I think there's been a certain leveling between, I don't want to say globalization, because it's not globalization, but a certain, people are more familiar. For example, if I wanted to go to a pub and sit down with a book and a glass of wine, I could do that in Dublin. I couldn't do it in Italy, not in the 80s. I can do it now. So I can't say that I miss going to a pub and sitting down with a glass of wine, because I can do it here if I want to. Women they're given more freedom now, which I think is a good thing.
Yes,
so those little things, they've worked themselves out here. It's just still the courtesy on the road.
And what's the thing that you don't miss? And please don't say the weather, because I'm sure you're going to say that, but don't say the weather. Try to come up with something more surprising.
Okay, let's see. Something that I don't miss.
Yes.
Temple Bar on a Saturday evening.
Yeah.
It's kind of scary.
And it's getting worse. Huh?
It's getting worse.
Yeah, it's getting worse. Dear. It's I think it's crowded. It's not authentic anymore. No. It's not Irish. And I mean, I was there last time when a friend of mine was visiting me, and he wanted to go there because he lived there. He lived here, and he missed a couple of places. He went for this nostalgic pint. Fine. I haven't. I think we were in 2 or 3 pubs. I haven't enjoyed none of them. So we end up somewhere near Stephen's Green. Can't remember now.
Oh, lovely. Neary's. I love Neary's in nearest you at Chatham Row. Do you know Neary's?
Yeah, that's a good one. That's a good one.
I like Neary's. It's quiet and it's the opposite of Temple Bar. So I don't miss Temple Bar on a Saturday evening. Now, Irish people, they work hard, but they play extremely hard. On a Saturday evening, it's quite chaotic. I don't miss that. I feel that Italian people know how to regulate themselves. They know when to say stop. Irish people, not so much. So I don't miss that.
The barrier. So I think Irish people are not that good at say enough. You're about to cross the line. And why is that? Is it like because they don't want to hurt the other person, or they don't have the courage to say what they think, or they don't want to create conflict?
I'm talking about going wild on a Saturday evening. In that kind of a sense, they don't know when to say stop. So it degenerates at a certain point. Up until, say, about 11 o'clock at night on a Saturday, it's fine. But beyond midnight, it degenerates. It's not fun anymore.
Yeah, absolutely. There's this British guy, this Chris Williamson. He has a fabulous podcast, and he used to work as a nightlife manager. Like he would run like clubs and things like that. And he said nothing great happens after midnight. Nothing great happens after midnight, and it's true to England, as we know. I think.
Yeah, it's true.
He grew up next to Newcastle, so okay. I think he knows the stuff, huh?
Yeah, I think he does. I agree with him.
Teaching English to Italians, can you tell us how is it? Any funny experience you want to share with the audience?
Pitching English to Italians. Well, the thing of it is, nowadays, just you won't get anywhere unless you have English. So it's Italians who have to motivate themselves and come to lessons. It's a struggle. I don't feel that Italians' genius lies in learning languages. The genius of the Italians, it lies elsewhere, I think, like in architecture, engineering, those areas there, Italians are geniuses, but not so much in language. They do tend to be a little bit, you know the Irish expression, "Asher, it's grand."
Yeah.
They're a little bit like that. I mean, if they have 5 words, they'll make 5 words do the work of 50 without leaving those 5 words. So it's difficult to get an Italian to move outside their comfort zone linguistically in the acquisition of a new language. It's something I always say to my students: move outside your comfort zone. I know that you know the word happy, but why not branch out a little bit and learn pleased, delighted, thrilled? Branch out a bit instead of just always saying happy.
It makes a difference if you say something that people don't expect. It's a rhetorical strategy, especially if it comes from an expat mouth, because every average expat would say happy. But if you are able to say something else, it's an eye opener, and you may be able to have a conversation with other person that you won't expect. Maybe you're going to learn something new. Maybe you're going to be shown something you haven't heard of. So I think it's going to make it rich. So if you make that effort, it's just for your own gain. But as you said, like, most people tend to be lazy and they are afraid to make a fool of themselves. So they rather stay quiet just to protect the way they are perceived by others. I think it's mostly based on fear.
That's true. And as a teacher, I do try and be understanding of people's fear of becoming vulnerable in opening themselves to criticism when they're communicating in a foreign language. I do try and be understanding. I don't criticize people. If they're trying to communicate, that's the important thing. I don't criticize, but I do encourage to move beyond their comfort zone. That's very important.
And that's what you did when you went to Italy in the mid-80s. Did you go by yourself, or did you know people there?
I knew no one when I think of it. But the thing of it is that there was a professor down in Bari, Rosangela Barone. She was enamored of everything Irish. And so she sent word to my university that she was looking for 2 candidates to be lettori down in Bari. I was one of them. The other lettori went back to Dublin. I stayed in Italy.
And how was it to be Irish by yourself in the mid-80s? I think most people would mix you up with an American or with a British. Maybe they still do, but not as much as before. Did you encounter some of that?
Absolutely. Here's the thing. I remember I refer to it as the spartiacque, the dividing of the ways, pre and post the 1990s European Football Championship.
Oh, yeah.
Before that point, I was l'inglesina. You can imagine how thrilled I was at that. And no amount of me saying, but I'm not English, I'm Irish. It's all the same. Here's the thing, because in Italian you have Islanda, Iceland, Irlanda, Ireland, and Olanda, Holland, Netherlands. It's just one letter of a difference. So Irlanda, it's all up there. It's in Northern Europe, it's all up there. So it really didn't impinge on people, Irlanda. That was quite a wake-up. It was actually something of a wake-up call for me. I think I needed, because as an Irish person, you do tend to grow up with the weight of history on your shoulders, feeling like a destined victim. I've got over that. But I have to say, I was sorry, I got lost off track. So you asked me what it was that, how did I feel about being mistaken for an English person?
Yes, in the 80s, because most people didn't know what was Ireland. I think unfortunately, back in the 80s, people would relate Ireland to some terror attacks and things like that, which is pretty sad.
That's actually an interesting point.
It doesn't represent Irish people.
That's an interesting point. I remember in the 80s and the early 90s, because the last bomb went off in 1998. On the 15th of August, Omagh, that was the last bomb. Every time a bomb went off, the Italians would come to me and they would say, okay, Elizabeth, can you explain to us, what's this whole big mess about the bombs? Why are the bombs going off? And my British colleagues would look at me and go, yes, Elizabeth, why are the bombs going off? And I would try and explain too earnestly, and just you'd see people's eyes glazing over. It was too much, until I realized that Northern Ireland is not Irish, it's British. So as soon as I started saying to my British colleagues, you know, Northern Ireland is actually British. As a British person, maybe you should explain why the bomb went off. They hadn't a clue. That stopped the questions. Now, the thing of it is, once peace came to Ireland, the peace accord, the peace agreement rather, that was a game changer. I found myself, I didn't have to be defensive about Ireland anymore. Now, the thing of it is, of course, peace came and the economy took off. Two things work together, right? I don't have to defend Ireland anymore. It's made my life living abroad so much easier. I just leave people free to think what they want about Ireland. You can say what you want. It's water off a duck's back at this stage. It's just another experience. So
and I would say that I cut you off. If you want to conclude, please.
No, I was just listening to what you were saying, Vitor.
Now, I was just going to say, from my understanding, when I'm abroad, I observe that myself, and some Irish people refer that to me when you are, say, in Italy, Spain, or France, that Irish people are much more popular than the English, because there is this very bad reputation about the British tourists. And there is some truth to that. Again, unfortunately, some British people are suffering because of what other citizens are doing. But I heard that as an Irish person, it's very good to come out as Irish, because you'll be better treated. Is it something that you
It's
experienced?
something I've experienced. It's something I've experienced even in Spain, where I didn't think that Irish people were going to be the most popular because of a certain type of Irish tourist that goes to Spain. But even in Spain, people are going, Irish, okay, that's all right. So I guess history has a funny way of coming full turn. As Irish people, I do think that the Irish have exported 2 holidays to the world. One is Halloween, because it's not American, it's Irish. And the other is St. Patrick's Day. And that makes me very happy. Just, for example, up until I think it was last year, the Tower of Pisa was lit up in green to mark St. Patrick's Day. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. So it's just, I feel it's a good legacy to leave around the world. 2 holidays.
Yeah, and I think that suits the Irish character, to export holidays, because I think it's something very important in the country, and people really care. So I think we'll make Irish people proud that the whole globe is celebrating that and having fun.
It's a holiday, that's right. It's an occasion of fun, absolutely. Just as long
The
as
other
we
one
don't-
is the amount of writers. Like I think Ireland has the if you compare the population and the number of literature Nobel prizes,
It's true.
the ratio, like Ireland is number 1.
Not bad for a small country.
Yeah, and is there a reason for that in Europe? And it's very hard to guess, but do you think is there a reason for that other than Irish people being avid readers? But in terms of creativity, for instance.
I do think it's a culture that likes a good story. So anybody who can tell a good story with all the necessary style and whatever, I think they're onto a winner. Irish people just like good stories. I mean, if you even look at a pub, what is a pub? People gathered around listening to one person telling a story. It's all about communication. It's actually a very oral culture. And here's the thing. In most of the world, I think the radio has gone down in popularity, and television, it's amazingly popular, but not so much in Ireland. Radio is still extremely important in Ireland. Many people listen to the radio. It's because it's the spoken word, the stories that the radio tells. It's just popular.
Yeah, that's telling. If the radio is still a thing for people,
It is.
so, especially in the current context that there are podcasts, there are plenty of things that you can listen on the internet. There are endless distractions, and if the radio can still find a place, that's revealing of the country. That just remind me of something someone told me. I think it was a Spanish guy who just moved to Ireland maybe like 10 years ago. And you know the housing problem here in Ireland. So until she found, we're not going to talk about that because we need another hour.
Yeah, that's true. It's terrible.
So when she moved here, she stayed with a family for like 2 weeks or a month. I don't remember the length, but it's irrelevant. And she, like, every evening she would have dinner with them, because they said, you're here on your own, you can sit with us. So they were very welcoming. And one thing that's lovely. That's really like, you are here, you are on your own, but you won't feel like that because you are living with us. Yes. So one thing that the big man said that she will never forget, and she told me, and I will never forget myself, is that Irish people don't tell things; they share a story. Instead of telling the pub was full. They will say I met that guy and I spoke about that, and then I couldn't finish the conversation because someone came in, and at some point we were eating in the table. That was a great night out, and the pub was crowded.
Make it a story.
They wouldn't say the pub was crowded, it was hard to find a place to sit. No, they will come up with a story.
Absolutely, I agree. Never let the facts get in the good way of a good story. That's what we say.
Yeah. In terms of stories and creativity, is there anything we have on the pipeline? I know you just finished a translation piece which probably took a lot of your mind. Is there any project you want to share with people?
I'm working on a project at the moment. It's not a historical novel. It's more contemporary. I don't want to talk about it too much because I don't want to take energy away from it.
Yeah, I know the feeling.
I hope to finish it in a few months. I'm working on it now.
Good. It's good. Look, I hope we can have a separate chat once the novel is available to the public. I'll be happy to read it. Same as the stuff it is already on the bookshop. So I'll try to put my eyes on this, and maybe we can have a round 2 on this, because it was great pleasure chatting to you. It
was lovely. I really enjoyed it.
Time. So I will make a closure, and I want to say thank you very much for the time.
Very much.
All the best for the novel, and best of luck for the piece you just translated. That will be available in December?
It's going to be launched on the 7th of December.
Here's a Christmas gift suggestion for the public there. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Vitor. It's been a pleasure talking to you.
All right. Thank you, Elizabeth. Have a good evening.
Thank you very much. Goodbye.
Bye.